Okay, so I'm Ryan, I'm a tutor in the Econ Tutoring Center. We're going to continue on with an example problem we were doing earlier here where I showed you a trick where you can convert from hours into units per hour, and we were able to do that and find that in this case that the US has the comparative advantage in corn and Mexico has the comparative advantage in the production of wheat. So now what we're going to talk about is how to find what we call the terms of trade, so the prices that these two countries are going to agree to trade at, right? Because once we find out who has the comparative advantage, we know that the US should spend all their time producing corn, and Mexico should spend all their time producing wheat. So then the question is, how much are they going to charge each other for that production, or to buy the other type of good from the other country? So basically it comes from what the opportunity costs are again. So we'll find those again really quickly. And remember, 1/20th corn in the US is equal to 1/15th wheat in the US, and that implies that 1 corn in the US is equal to 4/3 wheat in the US. And similarly for Mexico, that 1/30th corn in Mexico, so if they have 1 hour they can produce 1/30th, or they can produce 1/20th, which is why I'm setting these two things equal to each other. 1/20th wheat in Mexico, right, which means that 1 corn in Mexico is equal to, or you could say it costs 3/2 wheat in Mexico. Remember, I did this in the last video too, I'm just doing it again so that you see how we get what we call the prices. Right, so like I said before, this is approximately 1.66 and this is 1.5, right? So the opportunity cost of producing corn in the US is 1.66, and in Mexico it is 1.5. Oh, I'm sorry, that is not 1.66, that's 1.33, excuse me, 4/3. Right, which is why the U.S. had the comparative advantage in corn, and Mexico had turned out had the comparative advantage in the other good wheat. So we know that this is how much the U.S. it costs them every time they produce a unit of corn, and this is how much it costs them to produce every time Mexico produces a unit of corn. So when these two countries specialize and the U.S. produces all corn, you know that they're going to have to at least get this much wheat every time that they trade a unit of corn. Because if they're going to get less than this, then they would just be, producing it themselves and consuming themselves. They'd have no reason to trade, right? And Mexico, likewise, is never going to pay more than 1.5 units of wheat for 1 unit of corn. Because if they're going to pay more than that, they would just produce it themselves for 1.5. So we know what we call the terms of trade, or essentially the prices that they agree on between the two goods, is going to be somewhere between 1.33 and 1.55. So a candidate could be 1.4. Maybe that would benefit both Mexico and the U.S. because the U.S. would get more wheat than it cost them to produce, right? And the Mexico would lose more wheat than it would cost them if they were producing corn, lose less wheat rather than if they were producing corn on their own. So, and that's a mutually beneficial price to agree on, and so it's possible that that is a particular price, but it could be anywhere between 1.33 and 1.5. So similarly, if we find what the opportunity costs are for the other good, for wheat, we could come up with terms of trade then as well. So this means that 1 wheat in the U.S., if I multiply over, is equal to 3/4 corn in the U.S., and 1 wheat in Mexico is equal to 2/3 corn in Mexico, right, which is 0.75, and that's approximately 0.66, which again is how we found that Mexico indeed has the comparative advantage of wheat because their opportunity cost is lower, and the U.S.'s opportunity cost is higher for this good. So again, they will agree to some terms of trade, some price that's in between their two opportunity costs. So the U.S. would never pay more than 0.75 corn for every wheat, right? Because if they did, they could just produce it on their own. And Mexico would never accept less than 0.66 because otherwise they would just be better off producing themselves, producing corn themselves, right? So they'll agree to some price or some trade-off in between their two opportunity costs. So a candidate could be 0.7, right? maybe every time Mexico produces a wheat, they trade it to the U.S. for 0.7 corn, and that's something that some agreement that they come to. So that's the idea of terms of trade, and it all comes from this idea of opportunity cost, and that's how you kind of can derive how countries might trade once they specialize after they find who has the comparative advantage. And so hopefully that gave you an idea of what terms of trade is about and how you can find that from their opportunity cost from some sort of chart like this. If you have any more questions, come and visit us in the Econ Tutoring Center.